I love the passion that mothers have for their children. Have you ever had a mother question your sanity? I have. She came up to me after the basketball game. She looked me in the face and she said, "Why didn't you play my son more? Don't you know that my son is the best athlete in this gym, maybe in the universe?" I love that passion. The passionate love of a mother for her child. During one game, I was sitting next to a woman who happened to be my wife, and she was watching one of our sons play, and the ref called a foul on that son. And my wife communicated very clearly, that was not a foul. Not only that, that player would never even think of doing such a horrible thing to another guy. And then she proceeded to communicate to the ref that there was a new opening at the New York School for the Blind, and maybe he should apply, and she'd be more than willing to help him. I love the passionate love that mothers have for their children. Have you ever heard a little child say, "Watch this, Mom. Watch this, Mom"? And then what's really profound is to watch the response of the child if the mother gives that child her attention, as opposed to if she does not give the child her attention. If the mother gives her attention to that child, the child lights up. "Watch this, Mom. Look at this." But if the mother does not give her attention to the child, it's fascinating to watch the shoulders slump and the child walk away defeated. The power of a mother is incredible, to do amazing good and also to waylay a child. Have you ever heard a mother ask, "If what I'm doing is so significant, then why don't you watch me?" Yes, there are a growing number of mothers in our culture who feel that way. Am I doing anything significant in being a mother? And if I am doing something significant, why don't you watch me? That's exactly the way Hagar felt. She was basically an immigrant from Egypt who was used by an infertile couple, Abraham and Sarah, to bring a child into the world named Ishmael. But before the birth of that child, the competition, the jealousy, the meanness got so intense between Sarah and Hagar that Sarah ran away. And out in the desert, God met her. And God communicated to her, "Hagar, the child that you are bearing, I will turn into a great nation." And after that conversation, Hagar called God a new name. The name Hagar used in Genesis chapter 16 is, "You are the God who sees." And that's exactly the point of the psalmist in Psalm 139. "Oh Lord, you see me. You see me wherever I go. You see me. And because you see me, I am significant. Because you watch me, I know that you love me. I know that you are concerned about me." And so this morning we're going to talk about 4 parts of love. Not the love that is bottled in our culture, which is really narcissism. It's all about me and making me feel good. Instead, we're going to talk about the love of God and the love that God has enabled mothers, fathers, children to experience. First of all, it's a love that's orderly. Second of all, it's a love that constructs, it builds, it works, it improves, it grows. Thirdly, it's a love that grows a family culture. A family culture is habits based on values that show themselves in practical living. And fourthly, the God of the Bible is a God who has proven his love by becoming man in Jesus Christ, by living a sinless life, and then by bleeding and dying on a cross to forgive us and to give us eternal life. In other words, the love of God is a peacemaking love. And every day you and I have to choose, are we going to embrace that kind of love and exhibit that kind of love? For when the tensions rise in the home, we establish a family culture. We put habits in place. How are we going to deal with conflict? How are we going to deal with disagreements? How are we going to deal with someone losing it? Are we going to be peacemakers, or are we just going to stir the pot and make it more intense and worse? So first of all, the love of God and the love that God created you and me to experience is an ordered love. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 3, God says in the first commandment, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery, out of the land of Egypt. In other words, I'm a God of grace. I'm a God who rescues. I've rescued you from slavery. You are to have no other gods before me. Why? Because when you get into a personal relationship with God, when you get into personal relationships with people, it matters what the facts are. I need to remember your name. I can't just call you anything. I need to respect your likes and your dislikes, your preferences. In other words, the facts about you, your name, your education, your work, your talents are important. It's who you are. And if I'm going to build a relationship with you, I have to respect who you are. Love the Lord your God, Jesus says in Mark 12, 30 and 31, with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. And part of loving God is very different from loving a human being. My love for God is to be expressed in worship, in obedience, in the profoundest trust possible. No, I don't worship people. No, I don't necessarily obey people. So my love for God is to be preeminent. It's to be shown in worship, in obedience, in yielding to consistently, in submitting to God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And in Matthew 6:33, Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Seek first the love of God. Seek first loving God. God, love Christ more than anybody or anything else. And in 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 16 to 18, Paul writes, be joyful always, pray continually, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is God's will for you in Christ Jesus. Well, how on earth do you do that, Cliff? I mean, how when life is difficult are you going to be joyful? How when your spouse is misbehaving, when your parents are misbehaving, when your children are misbehaving, how on earth are you going to be joyful? Be joyful always? You've got to be kidding me. No, when you put God first, when you put Christ first, when you live ultimately for his love, for his affirmation, that gives you the strength to love people even when they are misbehaving. Because you don't depend on that person for your identity. You don't depend on that person for a good day. Instead, you understand every day is a gift from God, and I will use it to serve God, to glorify God, as I respect people, as I forgive people, as I am a peacemaker. So the love of God and the love that God calls you and me to is an orderly love. We're to love God first. And secondly, we're to love our spouses. One of the biggest gifts that you can give to your child is to love your spouse. One of the biggest gifts I have given to my children is to love my wife. So we love God first. We love our spouses second. We love our children third. And the interesting thing about loving children means that it includes discipline. In Proverbs chapter 13, verse 24, we read, he who spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is careful to discipline him. Why discipline? What's the purpose of discipline? Just to be a mean parent? No. Instead, we discipline our children in order to train them to use their God-given talents to accomplish the greatest good. Discipline is intended to train our children to use their talents to accomplish the greatest good. Do you want that for your child? I know you do. I want that for my child. And so we discipline our children, but we don't just discipline them, we encourage them by building them up, by affirming them. We encourage our children by opening doors of opportunity for them. We encourage our children by being there for them. Hey, Mom, watch this. Hey, Dad, watch this. We long for people to give us their attention, their affirmation. And so we love our children with a love that sacrifices. Is that work? Of course it's work. Being a mother entails tremendous work. That's why we say that becoming a mother begins with labor. That's right, labor. Love involves work, working for the other person, working for our child. And then I really appreciate my wife, Sharon, for the way she encouraged me to have fun with the kids. And we would wrestle on the bed at night, and often they would go flying off the bed, and Sharon would run upstairs scared that they had broken their neck. Fortunately, they never broke their neck. But we played a lot, and we sure enjoyed sports together. Other families enjoy art or music or hobbies or working together outside. But the challenge is to love God, to experience His joy, and to have fun together. And that's why we read in Psalm 118:24, "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." God is the most joyful being in the universe. And therefore, mothers and fathers, as we raise our children, are to be conduits through which God's joy floods into their lives. I'll never forget Sharon bursting into the boys' room in the morning to wake them up, singing, "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." Joy. That is one of the things I so appreciate about the way Sharon has mothered our children. There has been an undercurrent of joy. Joy that is not based on the circumstances of life. Joy that is based instead on grasping the character of God, which means I'm going to grow in my confidence in God, and joy is an expression of my confidence in God's goodness. Joy is an expression of my confidence in God's love for me. Often parents ask me, "Cliff, how do you build your child's confidence?" Well, you build your child's confidence by helping them grow in their confidence in their Creator, in His character as being good and loving. And when you begin to understand that God's character is good and loving, then joy is the natural overflow of grasping the character of God, of loving God, and being a recipient of His love. God created us to enjoy Him. And joy is the clearest statement possible of the worth of God. Joy is the reverberation of the heart to the value of God. And when you begin to grasp the value of Jesus Christ, the natural reverberation of your heart is to explode with joy. What a key part of being a mother and a father that is. To live out, to communicate the joy of the Lord. You see, the love of Christ, the love of God, is an orderly love. You love God first, you love your spouse second, you love your children third, and then you love your work, because your work is the way you use the gifts God has given you to make this world a better place. Your work and the people you work with, the people you work for, the people you serve, your work is the way you actively love people, serve them, and help them. And so, yes, mothers love deeply, passionately. And that love is one of the most exciting experiences you and I can have. Secondly, not only is the love that God calls us to an orderly love, but secondly, it's a constructive love. You and I can construct and help a child construct their identity, their sense of worth and value. You're created in the image of God. You have innate value. You're loved so much by God that He sent His only Son to bleed and die on a cross to buy you back. In other words, God has a price tag on your head, my child, and that price tag is the life of His only Son, Jesus Christ. Do you grasp how valuable you are? And God has given you gifts. That's why you're valuable. He's given you gifts, and you're to develop those gifts. You're to get a good education. You're to work hard so that you can use those gifts to make this world a better place to be. And yes, it's fascinating that love is constructive. It's a challenge, isn't it, when you raise a child, not just to focus on the external, not just to focus on the behavior, because the behavior is right there in your face. How are they behaving? Are they embarrassing you in public? Are they embarrassing me in public? Or are they behaving well? But it's amazingly tempting to simply focus on the external. The challenge as a parent, the real challenge is the internal heart of a child. How is that heart growing? In softness to God, in softness to others, in strength in life, in confidence, in security in life. Is this heart learning to love God and to love people, or are they apathetic or getting hard on the inside? And that is why the responsibility to love a child includes so much construction of a self-image, construction of self-worth and value, construction of an internal heart that learns to love God and to love people. Another part in raising a child that is so constructive is to teach a child what true success is. You and I live in an environment, in a culture that defines success as a high grade point average, lots of money, getting into the best school, getting the highest paying job around, living in the right house, driving the right type of car. Guess what? That's a false definition of success. Success really has very little to do with your accomplishments. Rather, success has to do with your effort. And therefore, in raising a child, how crucial it is to not wait for the accomplishment in order to praise the child, but to observe the effort that is being made. In the New Testament, Jesus defines success as not necessarily accomplishments. Have you accomplished more or have you accomplished less? But rather faithfulness. Are you using all the gifts, all the talents that God has given you to do the best job you can? Or are you wasting your talents in laziness? Are you wasting time in procrastinating? What a challenge it is to teach a child a true, accurate, biblical definition of success. And then children mimic well. Have you ever wondered why so many adults say, oh, the reason I can't stand Christianity is because all the Christian hypocrites? Yeah. Even adults observe rather carefully, and adults mimic rather well. But guess what? Children mimic, I think, even better than adults do. So if I claim to be a follower of Christ, and if I'm teaching my child and training them, teaching them verbally as I should, how important is it that I live out that faith in order that they can mimic me? Now, Stuart and Sarah are doing a great job raising our little granddaughter, Liv. Liv just turned 1 this past week, but it is incredible to watch my little granddaughter respond to me. She started going when she sees me. Now, why does she do that? Because I have put her on my lap over 100 times and given her a horsey ride. And while I'm giving her that horsey ride, I'm going. And now this little pre-1-year-old girl, when she sees me, looks me in the face and goes, what amazing mimicry. And then also what Liv does is, when she sees me, she puts one arm up and she goes, toot, toot. Why does she do that? Because since she was born, we've sung a song. We're going to the mansion on the Happy Day Express. The letters on the engine are J-E-S-U-S. The guard calls all for heaven. We gladly answer yes. We're going to the mansion on the Happy Day Express. Toot, toot. The power of a child to mimic, to observe, and to copy is incredible. And so now the question becomes, what behavior does my child see me exhibit? How am I willing to forgive or not forgive? How am I willing to be patient or not to be patient? How am I willing to control my temper or not control my temper? Am I willing to say, I am sorry, or am I above that? Do I never do anything wrong, so I never have to say I'm sorry? Wow. And the child mimics you, and the child mimics me. Do you see how constructive love is? You construct an environment. You place the child in that environment called a family. And that child learns as you teach them about God, as you teach them about life, as you teach them about hygiene, as you teach them about education and art and music and sports. And do they mimic? Oh, yes, they mimic. They mimic you and me very precisely. So love is constructive. But thirdly, not only is love orderly, not only is love constructive, but thirdly, you build a family culture. Like it or not, you build your family's culture. I build my family's culture. We all build a family culture. What on earth does that mean? It means you and I have habits that we live out. Those habits are based on values that we hold. And those values that we hold are shown in the way we practically live life. Habits based on values, values lived out in practical everyday life. Now, what does that look like? Do you pray before meals? That's a habit. The Bible never says you got to pray before every meal. But you're going to decide if you're going to teach your child to thank God. Now, there are many different ways to teach a child how to thank God. But one of the ways we taught our children in our home to thank God was to thank Him for the food before we sat down to eat. Another habit that we had in our home, we developed a family culture, Sharon and I did, was to have bedtime with the children, where there would be singing, going over a memory verse, a Bible story that would all follow a wrestling match on the bed. Now, I know that many of you do not want to wrestle with your children, and I respect that. I'm a little weird. And Sharon told me that often when I would bounce the boys off the bed. And she was right. But we still had a type of bonding that occurred when we wrestled. But then we did a Bible story, a prayer, and we sang, "Turn Your Eyes Upon Jesus" together. I learned that. I mimicked that. It's what my father did with me, with each of his 6 kids. And so we had that habit in place through which we were trying to communicate values. We were building a family culture. Our family culture also involved church attendance. And I got to coach the boys in soccer up through the 4th grade. And in 5th grade, town soccer changed to travel soccer. But there was a problem with travel soccer. All the games were Sunday morning. And I'll never forget looking each one in the face and said, "Well, guys, soccer's come to a conclusion. We're not going to be doing this Sunday mornings. We're going to be in church Sunday mornings." Why? Because God teaches an orderly love. And we are to love God above sports, even above our family. God comes first. Jesus Christ comes first. You don't have to do that. But I promise you, you will establish a family culture. From either your thoughtfulness or your thoughtlessness, you will establish a family culture. You will establish an environment in which you raise your children, and they will be mimicking you, and they will be getting lessons from you very, very clearly. I read about Ellen DeGeneres this past week. In an interview, Ellen said, "My mom and dad got a divorce. And when I was 13 years of age, my mom brought a lot of different guys into our apartment. Most of those men were horrible, and I had to kick them out." You see, friend, that's a culture, a family culture. Is it fair that a 13-year-old girl has to kick horrible men out of the apartment for the way they're treating her mother? What does that do to a child? Now do you understand why we are so grateful for mothers who passionately love their children, for mothers who passionately love their husbands, but most of all, for mothers who passionately love God and put God in the number 1 slot, and then, because of their security in God's love, are free to love their husbands, are free to love their children, even when their husbands and their children are misbehaving. You establish a family culture, and so do I. And that's what Eve did. And then Eve, the first mother recorded in the Bible, experienced the incredible pain of one of her sons murdering his brother. Can you imagine the pain that Eve experienced? And yet Eve had to handle that pain. deal with that pain, and then model for her children how to handle pain. And it's fascinating to watch family cultures in this part of the world, in Fairfield County, in the United States, where parents are often tempted to bubble wrap their kids and to make sure that everything's always happy and everything's always positive. I'm sorry, friends, that's not life. Life is not always happy, happy, happy. Instead, pain will invade your children's lives. Pain will invade my children's lives. And how crucial it is as a mom and a dad to teach a child not to get bitter against God when difficulty and pain enters their lives, but instead to learn to rest in God's love, to trust in God's power, to be aware of the fact that God has been with me, is with me, and will always be with me. Therefore, I am able to handle pain, not by getting bitter against God, not by being bitter against people and ripping people apart and losing my temper. No, instead, by settling into the love of God, by communicating my pain, by weeping, by mourning, but then also by experiencing the joy, a deep joy that comes from knowing God understands what's happened, He understands what is happening, and He understands what will happen. He's the eternal God, and He sees me. And the reason He sees me is because He loves me. He's got the hairs of my head numbered, and therefore, with His help, I can go through this pain, I can go through this sorrow, and I don't have to lose it all over people, and I don't have to get bitter and cynical. Wow, Eve had her work cut out for her. And yet she did quite a job. For she had other children after Cain and Abel who loved God. Eve handled her pain well, the evidence is, and she brought up other children who learned to trust God and to walk with Him. And so, as parents, we seek to communicate an orderly love. We seek to understand that love is constructive. And we also seek to establish a family culture. And in that family culture, we bring in habits which show values, which shows itself in practical living. And fourthly and finally, the Bible proves that God loves you. And that is the cross of Christ. The cross of Christ tells us a lot about God. In spite of the fact that you and I have flipped God off, rebelled against God, in spite of the fact that you and I live in a moral desert of our own construction, God still loves us, in spite of the fact we've spit in His face, essentially. The cross is also a statement you cannot save yourself. Regardless of how good you are, how righteous you are, what a goody two-shoes you are, you can't save yourself. You cannot get God into a position where God owes you heaven. It's impossible, because God is holy and you and I are not holy. The cross of Christ shows us that at infinite cost, at amazing sacrifice, God sends His only Son, Jesus, to bleed and die on a cross for you and for me, to forgive us and to give us the gift of eternal life. Now, is what I said just difficult for you to understand? Yes, that's hard. And it's hard for a child to understand. And therefore, it behooves you and me to learn to communicate the sacrificial love of God so that children see that in our lives. And then when we tell them about how God loved us so much, He sacrificed His only Son for us, then they begin to be able to connect the dots. Mom and Dad loved me with a sacrificial love, and now they're telling me about a God who loves me so much that He sacrificed Himself on a cross for me. You see, friends, that's what my mom and dad did for me. They loved me with an incredible sacrificial love. And then they told me about the God who loves me so much that He gave His life, His only Son, for me. And I was able to connect the dots because I saw it in Mom and Dad's love for me. The young man was born in South Korea. When he was in junior high, there was a field day at school. And his mother came to watch him run. As soon as he saw her, he ran away from her. When he got home that day, he said, "Mom, I never want you to come again to school. You're an embarrassment to me. You're poor and you only have one eye, Mom. And my classmates taunt me about my one-eyed mother. Don't ever come to school again," he said. Well, he graduated from high school and he went on to Seoul University. He did well. He got a high-paying job. He married, he had a family, had a high-paying job. One day there was a knock on the door. He opens the door and there's his mother standing with her one eye. His little daughter shrieks and runs away, scared. He looks her in the face and says, "Who are you? I don't even know who you are." And she says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I got the wrong address." She turns around and walks away. Several years later, he's going to a class reunion. And the class reunion is held in a city near the shack he grew up in. And he said, maybe I should go and visit my mother. So he goes to the little shack outside the city. He walks into the little shack, and there is his mother lying on the floor, unconscious. But she has a letter in her hand. He takes the letter out of her hands, and he notices it's addressed to him. And she writes, "Dear son, I understand that you've been angry with me. I always figured that was because you loved me. It did hurt at times, but I just so enjoyed being with you. There's one thing I never told you. When you were a little boy, you had an accident and you lost one of your eyes. And so I gave my eye so you could see, because I wanted you to get a good education. I wanted you to be a success. I wanted you to thrive. Now, I know you're embarrassed to have me seen with you around your family and in your neighborhood. But I was wondering if it would be possible if just occasionally you could come and see me, because I really love you." When you are confronted by that type of sacrificial love, you are confronted by something that science cannot explain, that money cannot buy. You're confronted by a human being who's created in the image of God, who has the innate ability to sacrificially love someone, even when that someone is spitting in their face. And that is exactly what Jesus Christ did. When people were spitting in his face, he dragged a cross up a hill, was nailed to it, for you and for me, and for those who were spitting in his face. And so mothers love with a sacrificial love of God. And that sacrificial love radically constructs a life, radically changes lives, radically draws people to you. Thank you, moms, for the way you love God, love Christ. Thank you, mothers, for the way you love your children, when they behave, when they misbehave. Thank you, moms, for the way you love their dads, when their dads behave and when their dads misbehave. For you see, friends, that is the true power of God, to love. And that is the true power of a mother, to love with the love of Jesus Christ. God bless you as you love with that strong, powerful, sacrificial love. A love that is orderly, a love that constructs, a love that builds a family culture, and a love that God has proven he has for you by sending his son Jesus Christ to rescue you and me.